Hey, welcome to Shmirchik Corner. I thought this was funny because I love to hear people that are, basically, this guy seems impartial. His name is Tomlinson, and I saw his video, it just popped up on my YouTube, but for example, if I go and look at the comment section, right, it's very, most of his comments are from people who don't like Jews, right? Like anti-Semitic. And it's so interesting because I noticed that people like Piers Morgan, for example, they don't realize just how anti-Semitic they are. And the problem is, the reason why they don't realize that is because
we can't oppose Zion.
The reason why they don't realize that they're anti-Semitic is because it's so normal for them. It's part of their culture to be anti-Semitic. And so, if you look at this guy, right, he writes here, did Jews really build the American left, right? And then he puts on this girl who is a big mouth, right? Jewish, Zionist, and she has a lot of opinions, right? I don't really care much for... I mostly don't really care for politics, right? If I'm going to be honest, I don't really know much about it, but I can't see what's before my eyes, right? I can see if something is... if someone's a Jew hater or not, right? So, I don't know if this guy is a Jew hater, but he's going to go and talk about this girl, Batya Unger Sargon, right? And she has her opinions. He's going to give his opinions, but if you go into the comment section, don't ask them what percentage of Bolsheviks were Jews, right? So you have all these anti-Semites that are on his comment section. So that's his audience. So if that's the kind of audience he's attracting, for example, like people who hate Jews, he's not liking their comments, but the people that, the British, they're very anti-Semitic. They don't like Jews. Most of the population, especially the locals, the white locals, were the ones who, and are the ones, who are taking part in the pro-Palestine protests against Israel. So, if they say it is inspirational. If we say it is anti-Semitic, right? They have absolutely played a huge role. They're not solely responsible, though, right, for the left, for the left, because the left is supposed to stand for liberal values, for feminism, for human rights, civil rights. So a lot of his, the comments in the section are anti-Semitic. So that's his demographic that watches his stuff, it looks like. I don't know, maybe not. But then I went and I looked in his videos, and I see that he went to Israel. So I'm going to comment on what he says about his trip to Israel, and this is going to be a field day. It's going to be a lot of fun, because, yeah, let's just get into it, shall we?
Yoram Hazony and the Herzl Institute, and I had some thoughts. So I went to Israel for the first time, thanks to Yoram Hazony and the Herzl Institute, and I had some thoughts. And those thoughts, right off the bat, are going to get me accused of being both a Zionist shill and an anti-Semite. As has already happened, because I wrote this nifty article here. It's on Substack. It was originally published on Courage Media. You can read it in either place. The Substack version does have an abridged option.
Oh, so he said he went with the Herzl Institute, right? Yoram Hazony and the Herzl Institute, he went to get a tour of Israel, right? So he's going to go and give his ideas on Israel. And so, listen, in this space, when it comes to Jews, you can't really be in the middle, because if you're in the middle, if you try to be in the middle and you don't stand for anything, then everybody will attack you. So this guy is playing that line, but it looks like that's not helping him.
And a bunch of photos from the trip as well, because the highlights of the trip were the ability to see the various Christian heritage sites as a Catholic, like walking the Via Dolorosa, seeing the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, seeing the Church of Flagellation, visiting the Garden of Gethsemane, the Church of All Nations, before, Hamas rocket decides to bomb them to rubble. But when I posted this on Twitter, and I posted extracts from my piece, and what I thought was quite a balanced post, predictably because the word Israel and the word Jews was mentioned, there was quite a reaction. And yeah, the memes were quite funny. I found this hilarious. It's because I posted beneath it, no, I didn't break the wall, I'm Catholic, I'm an Englishman, I'm not Jewish, I don't belong to any of the various ethnic quarters that Jerusalem is balkanized into. If it weren't for mass Muslim migration making this the issue of the day by calling for intifada, jihad, and from the river to the sea, Palestine to be free, almost every week in Westminster, it wouldn't feature in my national conversation at all. And so I wouldn't go and kiss or pray at the Wailing Wall, because...
Okay, listen. there's a reason why the Christians did the Crusades, right? They wanted to go to the Holy Land and they wanted to possess the Temple Mount, right? There's a reason why the Arabs are so crazy about Al-Aqsa Mosque, right? Because they believe it's their holy place where it's not. But there's a reason why both Christians and Muslims demand and have throughout the ages gone on a conquest to capture the Holy Land, right? So, and to occupy it. So, who are we kidding, right? Okay, fine, you didn't kiss the wall. You didn't kiss the wall and you didn't pray at the wall. It's your loss, right? But anyway, come kiss our wall. Why didn't you kiss our wall? You know, it's like, if you're a spiritual person, right, and you are a Christian, like most Christians would say that are pro-Israel, they would say that you should go kiss the wall. Why didn't you kiss the wall? Oh, because it's not your holy place, right? But your God is a Jew, they say. They would argue. I don't really care, but I think it's funny that you purposefully didn't go to kiss the wall, as if you're trying to take a stand for something, but that's not going to help your case. Nobody really cares. The fact that you actually just showed up at the wall, that is already going to get you into trouble, so you might as well kiss it while you're at it. As you can see, people made memes about you, and they photoshopped you, so it's just, the whole thing is ridiculous.
It's not my tradition, it's not my religion, and it would be disingenuous and disrespectful of me, I think. I saw one yarmulke dispenser right on the ramp over here, as you can see down there, and I just turned around and walked back. Not my thing. However, despite me not doing this, the accusations flowed in that my read on the situation was purely apologetics for the state of Israel, that I'm a bought and paid for Israeli propagandist.
How does it feel?
And also I got the response.
How does it feel? How does it feel to be accused of... How does it feel to be accused about things you didn't do? Right? Like, you're not being paid, obviously, by anybody, but, like, how does it feel to be accused of something that you didn't do? Like, that feeling, let it sit inside of you, and just understand that that's how Jews feel every day, because we get accused of doing all different kinds of atrocities, and we've been accused for 2,000 years, also by the British, of doing blood libels. The first blood libel was in England in the 1400s, right? So just let that feeling of being accused of something you didn't do sink into your soul.
From the likes of a Trump administration appointee who is serving at the Department of Education, and no wonder they want to dismantle the Department of Education, because it turns out that even their
Sorry about the noise. My washing machine is on.
appointees failed basic reading comprehension tests, that apparently this British guy visited Israel, and his incoherent takeaway from the trip is that Israel is somehow culpable for the choice of British voters who had brought millions of Muslims into the UK. What? Number one, we have voted against mass migration in every election and referendum since 1974. You have no idea about the politics in my country. I don't know whether or not you visited, but you certainly haven't spoken to anyone who's knowledgeable on the issue, so please shut up. Second of all, you also didn't read my article, or at least you didn't read it properly, because during my trip there, and this is why the accusations of being a unvarnished Zionist shill also don't hold weight, I took the free holiday, I took the opportunity to see the Christian heritage sites, and when I was presented with Israeli academics and members of Knesset making the positive case for Israel, I decided to voice my questions and objections, because, of course, because it's Israel, you come to the country with some preconceived notions. For example, the fact that Danny Danon and Ram Ben Barak, two members of Knesset, had a 2023 written this Wall Street Journal article saying that the West should welcome Gaza refugees. And it says,
Yeah,
like Angela Merkel
we
declared
should.
Vishaf and Das and let in a bunch of Syrians and Afghans who went on to commit lethal terror attacks time and time again, including multiple early this year. They say, looking to these examples, as in between 2015 and 2016, Germany alone admitted more than 1.2 million refugees and asylum seekers, about a quarter of whom were Syrian. They say countries around the world should offer a haven for Gaza residents who seek relocation. No thanks. If you guys can recognize that they are a jihadist population, over 1,000 of whose civilians participated in the October 7th massacre, pouring over the about 90 breaches in the Israeli border, whooping, cheering, handing out sweets and celebrating the various murders and molestations that happened of innocent civilians on that day, why the hell should they be my neighbors? You can't really
Well, listen, most of the British population does not believe that October 7th happened. And they don't, if they did believe that it happened, they think that we killed ourselves, we Jews killed ourselves, and the Hannibal Directive, and they don't believe the sexual assaults happened, and they don't believe the Hamas murdered 1,207 people on that day and kidnapped more than 250 hostages. So if that's the attitude of the majority of your country, then I don't see why they would object to taking in these wonderful people, especially since they claim to care so much about them. Every single day they're going on marches against Israel, right, and screaming about the poor Palestinians. So why wouldn't your country take them in After all, they can't be such bad people as you say. You seem to have a rational mind, right? That seems to have your head screwed on straight, so you can see the truth for what it is. But the rest of the people that are pro-Palestine, I see no problem, and why would they object to having them in your country when literally the majority of the British people stand with those people that murdered and slaughtered the Jews? I think it's only fair that you open your doors and have them as your neighbors, since love thy neighbor as yourself. Literally, make them your neighbor.
So they're firing mortar rockets over your border. Why should they be firing them at my house, at my city, and putting my family in danger?
Because maybe they won't do that. They're good people. Just treat them right. And they won't shoot rockets at your house, and they won't try to molest your daughters and your sisters and your mom. Trust the process, my friend. Trust the Gazan people. Trust the Palestinians. Trust the jihadi. They're good people.
When the Netherlands took them in, I think it was like 80% of them ended up with a criminal conviction. When Lebanon took them in the 70s, these people became part of the Muslim minority that caused the Lebanese civil war and ultimately turned Lebanon from a Christian into a Muslim country. Our treacherous leaders are already engaging in replacement migration. Please don't help them. And I actually asked about this also.
You know something? There's something called, the God of Israel is an eye for an eye, right? We're not Christians, and we're not any other religion from the past, paganism or whatever. We are a nation, and our God believes in justice, an eye for an eye, right? Which means measure for measure, right? God judges measure for measure. In the times of the Holocaust, you guys refused to take in Jews escaping Hitler's slaughter of Jews, right? And the British also kicked the Jews out. They expelled the Jews in, I forget the year. And so, I guess this is measure for measure. The British people are being punished for something that happened thousands of years ago, and you're paying for it now for the crimes of your forefathers. It's sad, but if we look at the majority of the British citizens today, how they march alongside the jihadis against Israel, and they are pro-Palestine, and they believe in ancient blood libels against Israel, that we murder Christian children to put their blood in our matzah, and today you believe in the same blood libel of, oh, Jews are doing genocide and targeting children in Gaza. That's what the majority of the British believe. So it's measure for measure, my friend, and the most delicious part about this is that your own leaders are the ones that are doing this to you. It's not the Jews, it's not any other country, it's not the Muslims, it's your own leaders. And that's the most delicious part about all this. The God of Israel is so, like, gesetzte. He is, it's geschmack.
Article multiple times to members of Knesset,
Yeah.
to academics, to people who are very pro-Israel within Israel. And I voiced them in a polite fashion, saying, we already have our own Muslim migration problem, we'd like to deport lots of them, thank you very much, and ensure that lots of them are encouraged to leave by banning the burqa, cousin marriage, halal, etc. 1, will Israel counter-signal us when they do that? 2, when there is a mass influx of Muslims back to Arab and subcontinental countries, will Israel kick up a fuss because it will consist of a possible security threat for you guys if the Abraham Accords nations don't manage it? And number 3, why are you encouraging, or at least 2 of your politicians, encouraging more Muslim migrants to come to my country? And I received 2 answers, and I won't attribute them directly to people by name because that would breach confidence and would do my gracious hosts at the Hustle Institute a disservice. However, when the speakers answered my question, they said 2 things. Number 1, this was just being advanced by fringe members of the Knesset. No, that's not true. Danny Danon is the permanent representative of Israel to the United Nations, and he was promoted to that position after this article was published. He is also a member of Likud, the ruling party, under Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He has not been sacked from his position for jeopardizing the security of Israel's respective allies for putting this out. So he's been promoted.
What allies?
Putting out this opinion.
What allies? You British people, you did the embargo on Israel since October 7th. Okay, I'm not sure exactly the details and the facts of that, right? But every single nation, France withholding weapons, England, America, Joe Biden withholding weapons, every single ally and friend that we're supposed to have in our time of need turn their back on us. You British people turn your back on us. What kind of allies are you? Are you really our friends? What kind of friends doesn't help a friend in need in a time of distress and despair, and in a time of their existence actually being jeopardized, right? Like, and their families after the atrocities. How did the British public react towards Israel, right? What kind of allies are you? And let's not forget, British has a very long history of anti-Semitism, and okay, we can give credit where credit's due. Yes, you emancipated your Jewish citizens at a certain time, earlier than lots of other countries, right? You abolished slavery earlier than America, for instance, maybe, if my facts are correct, right? And, okay, credit where credit is due, but the facts is that during the Holocaust, you accused the Jewish children that were snuck into England because the British rejected the Jewish refugees, and those refugees that got into Britain to escape Hitler, they were accused of working for Hitler. That's the type of perverted cruelty the British government and the British public did to the Jewish people that were trying to escape Hitler. And let's not forget the British, how they ethnically cleansed Jerusalem before 1948, right? Of the Jewish citizens, how they took the side and helped the Arabs in their uprisings against Jews pre-1948, right? Like, the British is not so innocent, okay? Let's be real here, my friends. Okay? So, I don't understand why you're bitching about everything that's happening to you now. You know, like, take it with grace. And love thy neighbor. Welcome them into your homes. After all, the majority of your citizens, of your people, love these people and march for them. So, take them in. Let them be your neighbors. Love thy neighbor. Turn the other cheek. I don't understand what the problem is, you know, like, really.
And then there's Ram Ben Barak, who was the former Deputy Director of Mossad and the Director General of the Ministry of Intelligence Services and the Ministry of Strategic Affairs. So no, they're not just some fringe members who have absolutely no influence or knowledge of the Israeli government's policy here. They're either involved in shaping it, or actively representing the government in world affairs at the highest level. I also received very vague assurances that deals would be cut with African countries, including Rwanda, because Paul Kagame is a very shrewd political operator, and Indonesia, to place these Gazans, Palestinians, in Muslim countries or countries that were willing to be paid to house them. However, they could not provide me with any assurances that they would then not leave those countries, cross places like Libya, North Africa, board boats, and go via the Mediterranean or through the Schengen zone and end up in my living room.
Well, that's your problem. Do you know what I mean? So if Israel wants to deport them, these Arab Gazans who murdered us on October 7th, if we want to deport them to any other Arab country and they make their way into your living room somehow, that's our problem? Like, go clean up your own backyard, you know what I mean? Like, oh, now we're not allowed to go and put them in Arab countries. We can't deport them at all now because you don't want them as your neighbors. But we have to tolerate these monster barbarians who slaughtered us and want to kill us off, right? We have to tolerate them in our backyard, but somehow even the Arab countries that we want to put them in, that's unacceptable because you're afraid that they're going to end up in your backyard. So you want us to put up with these barbarians, but you won't put up with them yourself. And yet you are telling us that we can't even put them in Arab countries because somehow that is wrong because you care more about yourself than you care for others. Like, this whole thing makes no sense. Do you see, my friends? Like, this is perversion at its best. It's like, we have to put up with them, and how dare we put them in another country and get housing somewhere else? Because, first of all, there's a humanitarian crisis in Gaza where they don't have homes anymore. So to, do a kindness and set them up in some other Arab country is somehow infringing on your rights in England because you're afraid they're going to land up in your living room. Because somehow, so therefore we have to be the gatekeepers and keep them in Israel, in Gaza, and somehow that's our problem. Fuck you. Like, who do you think you are? This is the perversion of the non-Jew, my friend.
Instead, when I raise that as an issue,
And the
something
Christian.
that is eminently predictable and foreseeable, given the examples of Syrians and Afghans used in Danon and Ben Barak's article, they then essentially threw up their hands and said, well, that's the fault of Europe's leaders. Reminder,
Yeah?
Europe's leaders are absolute traitors and have inflicted mass migration upon
Your problem, bitch. Stop bitching. It's your problem.
the recalcitrant populations.
How is that the Jewish person's problem that somehow you can't control your borders? Now you're trying to tell us that what to do with our people, right? With our war, how to conduct our affairs because somehow it's going to land up in your dining room? Like, I'm speechless, my friend. This is bizarre. But this is the way the non-Jew thinks and the Christian at it.
Against their wishes in all countries. So this is a concern for me, and it's an extra concern because my government is now doing this, and is doing this to the people who live in Britain, who are going to have to bear the costs.
You
In
deserve
crime, in more of our tax money being spent on refugee and asylum seeker, largely illegal migrant and unwanted invader, accommodation. So, Yvette Cooper has announced, former Home Secretary now, Shabana Mahmood is in charge, I'm sure.
You know, these tears are beautiful, my friends. Call me hateful, but I just love to see the Christian bitching and crying about their problems and trying to somehow make, to try to tie our hands, right, and try to make their problems our problems because their leaders are traitors, and the whole thing is perverse, my friends. You see what I mean? Like, this is ridiculous. This whole entire situation, the mindset of the Christian non-Jew in their country, somehow they just can't seem to understand that is their problem. Their immigration problems is their issues. Their leaders is their problem. Go clean up your backyard, my friend. Okay? Go deal with your own affairs. Leave us out of it. Okay? And don't tell us that us rehoming the dogs in Gaza to other countries, to other Arab countries, which is basically putting them back where they came from, right? Arabs come from the Arabian Peninsula, taking those slaughtering jihadi savages and putting them and their children in another country so that they can live happily ever after among their people. Somehow that we're not allowed to do that because they're going to end up in your bedroom. Oh, I'm sorry, but it's your issue. Fix your problem.
Well, that this Muslim Pakistani woman will get a handle on the situation and not just import more of her co-ethnics and the armour, he says sarcastically. Yvette Cooper announced that she, at the same time, while trying to crack down on family reunification chain migration, was going to make it easier and expedite student visas from Gaza. Why? If they can't build their country there, if the people from Gaza are ripping the pipes out of the ground that were left behind in 2005 when the Israelis left the region and turning them into the casings for mortar shells, I don't think they're going to be GDP rocket fuel and provide Britain with an abundance of doctors, lawyers and engineers. Instead...
Well, guess what? At least you admit the crimes of the jihadi Hamas monsters, what they do in Gaza and what they've done to us. At least you have balls enough to admit the truth and to speak the facts on your channel. At least that. Let's give you credit where credit's due. But still, I think that your society can handle these jihadis. They're good for you.
I just think that you want to import more terrorists and put my family in danger. Bear in mind, Pew Research survey has consistently showed, but it was back in 2013, showed that upwards of 40% of the Gazan civilian population think suicide bombing is justified to defend Islam. No thank you. Why would I take a 4, possibly much higher in 10, chance of being blown up by anyone? They don't need to be in my country. They shouldn't be in my country. And so, while I was in Israel, I raised the fact that prominent Israeli politicians had been lobbying for this. I also went to NatCon.
Well, guess what? Deal with your own problem in your own country with your own leaders, okay? Deal with your own internal affairs. It has nothing to do with Israel. It has nothing to do with us, okay? If your leaders are going to open their borders to the Gazan refugees, which they should, because literally it's measure for measure. This is karma. You're getting paid back for how you treated the Jewish people. And you're also getting paid back for standing with pro-Palestine jihadis since October 7. Your people, your locals in your country stand with those Gazans. It's only fair and it makes sense for you to embrace them with open arms. You yourself might not like it, but listen, this is your problem. You have to, at some point, you have to start taking responsibility for your own affairs in your own countries. You know what I'm saying? This is a perfect example of how people, they will shift the blame and they will complain about all these problems while admitting that the Gazan people, the facts of who they are, but they will not understand that somehow you have to, at some point, you have to start sorting your own life out. You know what I mean? Your issue and the fact that you have crazy leaders is not our problem. Figure your shit out. It's your issue.
Which is owned, hosted, organised by Yoram Hazony. Again, an absolute gentleman who does not want this to happen to my country, by the way. Yoram is very much on our side of these things, and raised this issue with Max Abrams, who is a pro-Israel academic, and Kurt Mills is also on stage, who is a anti-Israel writer. Kurt Mills works for the American Conservative. I disagree with Kurt on, for example, the classification of Pakistan and Iran as terror states only because, to paraphrase his words, they hold guns and Tel Aviv doesn't like them. No, I don't think it's because of Israel that the Pakistanis formed the green gangs in my country, for example, and attacked English children on the basis of their race and religion.
Okay, at least you admit that.
A needlessly myopic American view on this.
Well, at least you admit that, sir. Credit where credit is due. Okay, you're not completely out of your mind.
He did note that Max didn't respond to my question adequately at all, because Max just said, I hope they don't end up in your country, and basically said, your leaders should do all they can to stop that. The problem is, our leaders are inveterate traitors, and
Deal with
Israel
it.
has very few support bases left. This is the premise of my article, Why Israel Lost the Right. I go through the polling in here that says Gen Z across the board aren't Zionists.
We lost
The
everybody.
reason for this is threefold.
Because we never had anybody. We lost everybody because we didn't lose them. You can't lose what you never had. We never had anyone's support. From beginning to end. Never. The world hated Jews since we were born.
One, ethnic diversity. Especially in America, the increasing share of Gen Z, being the most diverse generation on record, we're only 52% of white, is going to lead to more anti-Jewish politics, because a higher share of blacks and Hispanics in America have a favourable opinion of Hitler than of whites. So you're going to lead to more third world brained takes about Jews being responsible for everything. Number two, leftism, especially among women, who have joined the
Wait a
Greens for
second,
Gaza
I'm not
cause
sure I
because they
understand.
presumably think that up is threefold. Number one, ethnic diversity, especially in America, the increasing share of Gen Z, being the most diverse generation on record, we're only 52% of white, is going to lead to more anti-Jewish politics, because a higher share of blacks and Hispanics in America have a favourable opinion of Hitler than of whites. So you're going to lead to more third world brained takes about Jews being responsible for everything. Number two, leftism, especially among women.
You do it yourself, sir. You yourself go around telling us that if we put our the monsters in Gaza in Saudi Arabia, for instance, or in Syria, or wherever else, whichever other godforsaken country where they belong, right? Somehow they're gonna land up in your living room because your leaders can't shut down their borders, and somehow that's gonna inadvertently be our fault if we put them in some other Arab country. You're a hypocrite, sir. But then again, the goy, they don't understand how anti-Semitic they are, even when they have a slight ounce of rationale, like this man has.
Joined the Greens for Gaza cause because they presumably think that Allahu Akbar means recycling in Arabic. So you're not going to win any of those guys over. But the third constituency are National Conservatives and Libertarians. After 3 decades of failed regime change wars in the Middle East, including promoted at the time by Benjamin Netanyahu while he was out of government, testifying before Congress saying that Saddam Hussein has weapons of mass destruction, and if you topple
that's our fault too.
The Saddam Hussein regime.
Oh, that's our fault too, right? The fact that America decided to go to Iraq, right? It's Netanyahu's fault. It's the Jews' fault. Not the fact that American government decided that for some reason or other they have to go to war with Iraq. It's not as if they have free agency. The American government doesn't have free agency. It's Netanyahu. It's his fault, right? He forced the Americans to do that. Like, you're doing the same exact thing that you're accusing the left of doing in America, right? And the right. Like, it's amazing how people are so these non-Jews, especially the Christians and people like him, have zero self-awareness how they look.
Iraq will blossom into a garden of diplomatic Eden. MAGA is basically entirely skeptical of wars for intervention. Now, this became hysterical, I think, during the Iran bombing, where President Trump's military intervention was actually very successful, but it is very reasonable to not want a single American troop on the ground spending American blood and treasure in the Middle East again.
First of all,
also,
it's questionable. The whole thing about, the war in Iraq was useless, right? Like, the more I read, the more I understand that it wasn't so hunky-dory, so simple, right? It could be that these nations did have weapons of mass destruction at certain times. I'm reading the book, The Al-Qaeda Connection, right? And it speaks about how, there were weapons of mass destruction being traded around, right? Especially when it came to when the Russian wall fell down, right? And then there was, like in the 1990s, and there was, the people were hungry. And so the people in the military were selling, the Russians in the military were selling nuclear bombs to different countries, to all of these Al-Qaeda and all these other countries, wherever the jihadis are, right? And so the good news is that most of those jihadis didn't know how to keep those nuclear bombs alive, because there's a certain scientific way you have to keep it going, to keep it alive, to keep it like generated, so that it has the effect to do its job, So it's not so simple, right? It's not as cut and dry and simple, like, oh, there was no weapons of mass destructions in Iraq, right? So, yeah.
A lot of our countries are suffering a deep economic, cultural, and demographic disfigurement at the moment. And so, much like the war in Gaza not really being my concern, because I don't belong to either of the fighting tribes, I am more focused on England than on Israel. Despite having visited, that remains the case, because England is my homeland. However,
sorry, Charlie.
what Israel should not do is, if they would like to repair their reputation. And this is something they're very anxious
We
about,
don't
otherwise
care.
they wouldn't have brought out a bunch of other influencers on a trip that was funded by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which I know someone was contacted about that and turned it down, fearing reputation damage. They are clearly anxious about their reputation. If they would like to reform it,
Not really.
they need
Not
to.
really. Israelis don't give a shit what anybody thinks of them. It's the same delusion that the Christians have, where they think that Jews are thinking about them, and somehow they take up an ounce in our brain about how they dislike them. Like, Jewish people don't care what you think of them. Jewish people, they just want to be left alone. Israelis don't give a shit about their reputation at all. Speak to most Israelis that I live in Israel, right? Most Israelis that I come across, they're involved in their lives. They don't care what you think of us, right? We already know you hate us. And it's okay. This is how it's been for 2,000 years. So calm down, and we don't care about our reputation because you will hate us regardless. That's just the truth of the matter. So we've never won the propaganda war, ever. Only people that have a special soul within themselves and they're connected to their higher consciousness, only they are the ones that actually see the truth and will stand with the Jews, right? But people like you, not so much. And it's okay. But don't worry. This is what I love about the God of Israel, the one invisible God of Israel who's not a man. He loves justice, he hates evil, and he's a God of vengeance, and he is measure for measure. He judges measure for measure, an eye for an eye. And we see it coming all the way around now. And so, like, the British closed their doors to the Jews escaping the Holocaust. They closed their doors to the Jews and sent them to the gas chambers. The British kicked the Jews out of their country. They expelled them. Guess what? Now, measure for measure, God is bringing those, by your own people, God is bringing all of the influx of these immigrants into your countries, opening the doors, whereas you close it to the Jews, now it's completely open, and you're experiencing things that it's sad that you have to go through this, but it is what it is. It's karma, right? And maybe this is your punishment, right? It's sad, right? Because, okay, there's that whole concept of, oh, a child shouldn't be punished for the sins of their fathers, but I think as a nation as a whole, you are judged. You have your angel over your nation is being judged. Your energy, your karma. And it is what it is, and so just take it with dignity and stop whining like a bitch and stop blaming us for your problems. Okay?
Understand that punishing the unrepresented majorities in Europe and Britain and the people who voted for Trump in the United States by encouraging more third world jihadists to come to their countries and live at their expense and endanger their families and attack their daughters. They must understand that this is perceived as a punishment by the latent national conservative majorities in those countries, and so they will collapse their final potential support base, who are already not particularly favourable to them at this point in time. And so instead, I wrote in my piece and in my long tweet that the way to restore friendly relations between Israel, the UK, the US and Europe is to not counter-signal us when we try to have what Israel has. Because something I noticed during my time in Israel, and something I noticed when talking to various academics and politicians and the people that were facilitating our trip, was that in Israel, there is no ethno-nationalist and civic nationalist divide. It's just nationalism. As in, it is incomprehensible to the Israelis that Jewish people in a Jewish state would not be the demographic, cultural, and political majority in their own country. As in, Israel will always be led by Jews. The majority population in Israel will always be Jews.
And there's a reason for that. What's the reason? Think. Put your you don't have a Yiddish Kepler, okay? So put your thinking cap on, okay? Why is it that we need the majority to be Jewish here? Why? This is one of the reasons why I don't know if I actually completely believe in a democracy here, because it's very easy to get overthrown through a democracy by other people, like what we see in England is happening, right? You have a democracy, and who's getting voted in? Muslims. That's a great way to get rid of democracy, through democracy, right? So Israelis, they're a little bit smarter than that. Jewish people are a little bit smart. We have a Yiddish Kepler. We have a Jewish mind, a Jewish brain. Yes, we're stupid in other ways. In some ways, we are not the smartest, but in a lot of ways, we're the geniuses, and we are we are very smart as people, right? And so we understand logically a lot of the time, right? Like, if we're going to think practically, that if we don't have a majority of Jews and we have a democracy, what happens is that we can easily get overthrown by our democracy by getting the demographic of the Muslims, the majority. Like my doctor told me after October 7th, my doctor, who is an Arab, he said to me, soon we'll be the majority here. We all know what that means, right? So, but in many ways, the Jews are stupid because we kind of weren't able to prevent October 7th, right? So, yeah.
Judaism will always be the official religion of Israel, even though it was founded as a secular state by socialists. David Ben-Gurion, the founding prime minister of Israel, got his ministers to read the Torah and the Tanakh, even though he himself was not a religious Jew, so they understood their duty to Jews as an ethnic people. So Israel is an ethno-state in the way that modern post-Enlightenment politics would understand the distinction between ethnic and civic nationalism. But that's only because that's kind of a fake binary. There is no Hebrew word for ethno-nationalism. There is no Hebrew word for civic nationalism. It's just nationalism, because a state describes a distinct people who own a piece of land. In the Bible, Israel becomes a state when the Jews go into Egypt. So they become a nation when they're in a different country. So that means that a people precede the nation which is named after them, the culture which is ascribed to them. And so the modern description of ethnic and civic nationalism, which is something I was trying to say doesn't really work in my recent interview with Andrew Gold, is non-existent in Israel. Instead, the Israeli model of nationalism just kind of works. Because they're self-confident, they have no shame about being a distinct ethnic people, they practice their religion, about 50% of them do national military service, they have high GDP per capita,
Why should we be ashamed? Why should we be ashamed?
Of replacement birth rate, they're the only developed nation with one, and this is true even among secular Jews who have 2 to 3 children, to say nothing of the ultra-Orthodox and very strange Haredis, who, if I might just comment, I put this in my piece. This was one of the weirdest parts of being in the culture there. You know the Chabad sect that were like tunneling on New York in 2024?
You guys don't even know what you're saying. You don't even know how to say it. It's Chabad, okay? And it's not as weird as you think it is. And it's, if you go and read a little bit about it, and you can go and look at my videos where I did many lives on the Chabad Lubavitch sect, which I actually come from, right? You can actually go and see what it's about without having your preconceived misconceptions and misconstruing what it is, how it is, what it's about, right? And
we're like emerging from the
sewer. Do you hear how he talks about Jewish people? Like, he doesn't realize it, but he sounds like an anti-Semite. That's like a little bit like Hitler spoke about it, like, oh, you know, the way he propagandized against the Jews, how he made us look into like rats running down in the sewer, right? Like, this is how he's talking about us, like the disrespect. This is why they're getting punished, the British. Listen to how he speaks.
To say nothing of the ultra-Orthodox and very strange Haredis, who, if I might just comment, I put this in my piece. This was one of the weirdest parts of being in the culture there. Yeah. You know the Chabad sect that were like tunneling under New York in 2024?
Yeah, listen.
And were like emerging from the sewer and running off into the night? Well, they believe that this guy... I don't speak Hebrew, so...
Emerging from the tunnels from the sewers and running off into the night. This is how he describes the Jewish people. Like, the anti-Semitism, he doesn't realize, these non-Jews, they don't realize how sick they sound, how evil and wicked and cruel and hateful they sound, just because it's normal in their culture to speak about Jews in this way. And that's why my friends are being punished. And I'm loving it.
Apologies for my pronunciation. Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson is the Messiah. Now, they're a strange cult that we weren't aware of until that New York scandal in 2024. But in Israel...
Excuse me. The President of the United States met with the Lubavitch Rebbe, Menachem Mendel Schneerson, and of blessed memory, and they asked his advice. Most of the presidents met with him. That's how great he was, and that's how much influence the Chabad movement has in the world, okay? So just because you're an ignoramus and you don't know anything about any other culture besides for your own Christianity, for the fact that you bow down to a Jewish man who's a bastard, just because you're ignoramus doesn't mean that just because you never heard of something, it means nothing. Like, just because the first time you hear something and it's so strange, it's strange to you, right? It doesn't mean that you are right in any way to kind of spit on this movement, right? And let's not forget, Obama had recognized, he made a day for the Lubavitch Rebbe, right? It was a day to recognize Or was it a moment of silence? I'm not sure what it was.
They put up posters on like every single road sign around Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, all the various highways up into the north and the Golan Heights, and it's just strange to see. It's a very different culture to mine, which is why, not being a dispensationalist, not being Jewish, I don't have a deep and abiding attachment to the land that compels me to be a Zionist or say Israel is our greatest ally,
That's
or
fine.
like Mike Huckabee once insinuated that he and Donald Trump were placed on this earth to save Israel and therefore to get it to heaven. Like, that's not how I think about things. That's not how anyone in my generation thinks about things, whether they're doggedly anti-Israel.
You're a bunch of anti-Semitic bigots running around salivating at the thought of dead Jews, you know? Like, I mean, not you in particular, but your people.
Yeah. Or just kind of apathetic because we care more about our own countries.
Not really. You don't really care about your own country because when all your women were getting raped by those jihadis, the only person screaming about it was that guy. What was his name? The guy that was put in jail. Tom, what's his name? That guy, and he actually loves Israel.
They're in, and we think, look, Israel's kind of doing well. The Middle East is ruled by the right of conquest. Like, every single minority group is persecuted. Every single ascendant empire persecutes a minority group. The war in Israel and Gaza is basically an imperial dispute over territory via right of conquest. The guy who bombs the other one off the face of the earth probably wins. I'm not that bothered.
Oh, so that's how you see it. So before you said that the jihadis slaughtered Jews and raped them, that's like the cause of the war, right? And you don't want them in your living room, but now somehow you change it to being Jewish people being imperialist and fighting is a land dispute. And so now you deny the fact that these people are jihadis and they have an incentive to murder every Jew on the face of the planet and they want to spread Islam. Like, make up your mind, bitch. You're sounding like a little whiny bitch. And it's getting me angry, sir. Like, at least have some self-respect enough to not sound stupid and like a bigot. Like, come on, man.
About it, but they can take care of themselves so long as they do not end up in my country. And that is a matter for international diplomacy. And the Israelis, in a quid pro quo, are concerned about future diplomatic ties, mutual investment between them and the United States, and therefore retaining some semblance of a support base in the West as the boomer generation of post-war evangelicals ages out of politics. And at the moment, they don't have any support. The only support they might get is not this unilateral expectation of sympathy because of the atrocities of the Holocaust. Instead, the only support they might get is if they say, yeah, of course we want England to be a homeland for the English. Of course we want America to be a homeland for heritage Americans. Of course we want Germany to be a homeland for the Germans, despite, historical problems that we've had with that. Because it's only self-conscious peoples with a state to call their own who can negotiate with one another, who can befriend one another, who can barter, and who can trade.
I'm sorry. Since the inception of Israel, you guys never showed yourself to be our friend. Ever. Since the Jews existed, you were never our friends. The West hates Jews. The Christians persecuted Jews in all of European countries, and indeed in South America as well, for however long they existed. Right? So, Christianity's crimes against the Jews goes back 2,000 years. And before that, it was the Roman Empire. So, the massacres, the Kishinev pogroms, the torture, burning at the stake, forcible conversions, right? The list is endless, the crimes of the Christians and the rape on the Jewish nation for 2,000 years. And somehow, now you're going to be our ally if we just decide to recognize that you can have your own country without being invaded by jihadis. Sorry, that's not how it works, my friend. That's not gonna get us if we recognize your countries that you can somehow don't have to go and be flooded by these jihadis. That's not gonna get you to like us any better. Nothing we do will make you and your kind like Jewish people. And let's be clear about that, okay? Let's not play games. Let's be real.
In fact, isn't it a lot sillier to have nuclear-armed Islamic powers dotted around the world who will train their weapons the first chance they get on the sole state in the Middle East that Jews live in?
That's a good point.
It seems awfully not sensible to me for the likes of Danny Danon and Ram Ben Barak to...
That's actually a good point they make, that we don't want England to be occupied by jihadis because England has nuclear weapons. And if the jihadis occupy England, they might just send their nukes into Israel because they hate us.
Encourage this.
Good point.
Also has not been very sensible, as lots of right-wing Jews that were with us on the trip pointed out, as I've written in this article, for lots of liberal Jews after the Second World War to promote a kind of grey goo multiculturalism, a liquidation of all identities down to the lowest common denominator of the blank slate, in the hopes that Jews themselves don't stand out. And this has been pushed by the left modernists that Eric Kaufman documents in the opening chapter of White Shift, who came to New York in the early 20th century and thought that liberalism was the only way that Jews wouldn't get persecuted, because if everyone was indistinguishable, then there would be no anti-Semitism. This has been pushed by the likes of Baroness Ruth Smeeth and Attorney General Lord Hermer in Britain, who occupied positions of prominence in the Labour Party and have stapled their Jewish identity to their communist politics and the promotion of open borders, which has ironically led to the importing of anti-Semitism from the Muslim world that has then made Jews who have settled in Europe for 300 years, including in Britain since Oliver Cromwell let them back in the 17th century, feel very
Let them back. At least you acknowledge your history.
Safe. And this has been called out by right-wing Jews as well, like my friend Paul Morland, like Eric Kaufman, and this is why there's the joke from Isaiah Berlin that I actually put in this piece, that and he, as Jew, defined anti-Semitism as a hatred of Jews that is more than is strictly necessary. It's kind of an in-joke that if you get two Jews in a room, you have three opinions. They don't agree on very much. However, I must point out, and Jordan Hazoni would agree with me here, that the nationalist Jews who want the likes of Europe, Great Britain, and America to have the same kind of model of national identity that Israel enjoys and that works, have not been nearly as present in national conversations as liberal Jews. And this is why people who would like to blame Jews for multiculturalism, mass migration, and the desolation of Europe can reach for quotes by obscure rabbis or that one video from Barbara Lerner-Specter and say, here, the Jews are behind everything. It's like, guys, if you're going to take centre stage in politics, following the atrocities of the Second World War, because you want to ensure the promise of never again is fulfilled, then allowing your liberal counterparts to run the show is only going to increase hatred of Jews and skepticism of Israel, because Israel exists as the exception to the rule.
Listen, this is something this guy doesn't get and other people don't get. It doesn't matter how many, even if there were other Jews, right? Like you have Jews today who stand with Palestine, right? With Arabs. That doesn't lessen the Jew hatred coming from the Arab world to the entire Jewish community. Those Arabs, even if they see some Jews stand with them, right, they will still go and slaughter Jews in a synagogue like they did in England, right, on Yom Kippur. And it doesn't matter if other Jews come out to combat these liberal Jews, right? We're going to be hated regardless. That's something that this guy doesn't get, right? And it's just something that is wrong with every society, that you have this issue where you're bigots. And maybe it's due because of your religion.
The lesson, as Yoram Hazoni writes in The Virtue of Nationalism, of Auschwitz, that the West took, was to become the European Union, was to become a self-flagellating non-empire to suppress national identity, a preference for people, history, culture, and to pretend that the blank slate was real, and to open their societies in the Karl Poperian sense to prevent racialism and state worship. These were the impulses that were diagnosed as causing Nazism and fascism and the pogroms of the Soviet Union, when instead the actual lesson that Hazoni says should be of Israel, establishing self-conscious nation-states.
So basically, regardless of even if he acknowledges the fact that, there are some Jews who are liberal and leftist, and therefore people look at them and say, oh, you see, all the Jews are responsible for this, right? Somehow, it seems he also feels the Jews are responsible for the problems in his country, for the fact that, oh, nationalism now is considered a bad thing, right? And it's because of the Holocaust and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's like, we can't really escape being blamed from everything, for everything.
In the
by this guy.
Of not nationalism being Hitler's greatest sin, but imperialism, because he invaded other countries to plunder their wealth and kill their citizens in a pursuit of German pagan racial purities. So I'm just going to read from Yoram's book here. He says, here then are the two competing paradigms concerning the meaning of Auschwitz. Each is looking at the same facts. Both paradigms take it as a given that millions were murdered in Auschwitz by the Germans and their collaborators, that the deeds done there were utterly evil, and that the Jews and others who died there were the helpless victims of this evil. By the way, I think that this double standard is actually what's increasing things like Holocaust denial and third world Jew spugging on the right.
So just keep excusing your crimes, and your anti-Semitism, and excuse the anti-Semitism, and maybe you're not a bigot yourself, but you're coming across as one. Like, you're saying that somehow we are to blame for our own for the fact that we're hated.
Because they see this contradiction, with Israel being the exception to the rule of the post-war liberal world order.
Because the Jewish people, we want a right to our national homeland, but somehow, because your leaders, because some Jews believe in Europe, right, and they have some influence, and so therefore they're very liberal, and so they want to squash the idea of nationalism, right? And so then the Jews get blamed for squashing the nationalism and not allowing the other countries in Europe to be proud of their own nation, right, and to be nationalist. But somehow the Jews are a hypocrite but they don't even understand that those Jews who are liberals, they also don't like Zionism. They don't like Zionism either, right? But then somehow, because of those Jews, the rest of the Jews, right, are getting blamed for those liberal Jews. But somehow, they don't understand the fact that this guy here doesn't really understand the fact that some Jews come along and they have these ideas, and the fact that your society and your leaders buy into those ideas and they get influenced by it. The fact that your societies are so easily influenced, it just goes to show that your societies are weak societies, and you're not strong-minded to begin with. So if that's who you are as a people, then you can only really blame yourself that some people have such abilities to kind of convince you of their way of thinking, and you completely buy into it. And it's almost as if you don't get the fact that you and your people, your societies and your leaders have agency. You have free will, but you choose to make bad decisions and blame it on the Jews, because some Jews have opinions, and so therefore somehow, because you decide to buy into them, somehow that is our fault and the entire Jewish nation's fault, and therefore we should be blamed for your issues now. Dude, I'm telling you.
They say, well, if Israel has nationalism and my country doesn't have nationalism, and if it's good enough for Israel, it should be good enough for me, and I want what Israel has, then Israel must have it at my expense, which means the Jews have taken it away from me, which means that the Holocaust was an invented narrative to deprive European peoples of...
And you're promoting this. You're saying that somehow... You're saying somehow the fact that Jews have we're nationalists, right? Somehow that is causing anti-Semitism. Indirectly, that's what you're saying.
Of national self-determination, whereas Jews get their own state. And so it is through this circuitous logic that you get Holocaust denial taking root and increasing, and this is something that the Israelis are clearly worried about. So, again, if you don't want to fan the flames of anti-Semitism, then it's probably wise to support national self-determination for the peoples of Great Britain and the United States.
So basically, it's the Jewish people's fault, it's Israel's fault for the fact that your nation and your liberals and your leaders are taking on some ideas, not only from Jews, but from just everything, right? And deciding that nationalism is a bad thing, somehow, because they're crazy. Somehow that's our fault, Israel's fault, and that's the entire Jewish nation's fault. And so therefore, now that is causing, because your nation has issues, right? And your political leaders are leftist lunatics, right? And somehow that is the Jewish nation's fault, and therefore we are to blame for the fact that you and your kind are becoming Holocaust deniers and Jew haters and bigots. I'm sorry, my friend, but if your people are becoming Jew haters, Nazis, and bigots and Holocaust deniers, it's just a reflection on your societies. You guys are sick. It's not us, it's you. It's about time you start bitching and take responsibility for your behaviors and for your choices.
And Europe. But the dichotomy that Joram is describing here is, how do you respond to Auschwitz? How do you respond to the atrocities of the Holocaust? How do you secure the promise of never again? Do you invent Israel, which is a state where Jews are the unquestionable ethnic demographic majority in their own country, where if Jews cease to be a majority in their own homeland, then Israel would cease to be? And so there are members of the Israeli left who are to the far right of right-wing politicians in Britain. Remember, Reform UK, both Nigel Farage and Richard Tice, even though they've taken better positions on migration as of late, both said they're not concerned about demographic change and white Britain's becoming a minority in their own homelands because they'll be long dead by the time that it happens. Whereas we spoke to leftists in Israel who thought it was inconceivable that Jews would cease to be a majority in their own homeland because they understood that Jews being a majority is the necessary precondition to the security of Jews in the region. So, yes, a people should always be a majority in their own nation. That people should be the only people governing that nation. There should not be a single foreign national, naturalized or otherwise, in a position of influence, either elected or in the employ of the state, because they're...
So you don't want your country to be a democracy, basically, and you...
Well, just too many questions about split loyalties to other countries, other faiths, other cultures, other families, to cast a shadow of doubt over their ability to effectively represent the demographic majority to whom the nation belongs, who preceded the nation, after whom the nation is named. And so, is Israel's response to Auschwitz a self-determining nation that is capable of defending its people and acting in their collective interest, or is the EU the response to the Second World War, which is a self-hating anti-empire which demands that Europeans must practice unilateral multiculturalism, so suppressing their own identities to accommodate hostile tribal foreign nationals in order to get to a place where all identities are liquidated and we have equality. And yes, the European Union model has also been pushed by liberal Jews who themselves have a cognitive dissonance about Israel being a homeland for Jewish people, whereas the rest of the world must be multicultural to keep Jews safe. And it is a...
So globalism basically is the Jews' fault. The liberal Jews who stand and basically don't like the nation, the idea of nationality, are somehow to blame for the fact that your country and your leaders are perverts. You are basically saying that your country has no agency, no freedom of choice. You're basically blaming the Jews for the fact that your country's fucked up and you have fucked up leaders and fucked up people. Thank you for exposing yourself for the Nazi and the bigot that you truly are, sir.
That double standard that I think is increasing anti-Semitism because of the perception of hypocrisy from the nationalist right. And it's not all nationalists on the right, and it's not all Jews pushing this. However, this is a real phenomenon, and it needs to be addressed.
And it needs to be addressed, and therefore the Jews are to blame. You fucking bigot. Do you not see what you look like? I can't believe this, but I can, because this is the face of Britain. And that is why. Because they refuse to take accountability for their own actions, because they refuse to see the consequences for their own behaviors, and because they don't want to clean up their own backyard, and because somehow there are a few liberal Jews and they have some weird ideas, and because your society decides to incorporate it because you have issues, somehow it's a phenomenon to be blamed on all the Jews, right? And you say, oh, I'm not blaming all the Jews, but oh, you are. You're not, but you are. Right? And it's not going to get you anywhere. And this is why you're being punished, my friend. Stop blaming the Jews. Okay, there are a few crazy Jews out there. But who are the people that basically are paying for, who are the first to go? Who are paying for your leaders' idiocy, right? The Jews got killed on Yom Kippur, right? Yes, I know. Your people have been, the women have been raped, little girls have been slaughtered, but it's not like the Jews are immune to this fanatic, crazy, loony ideas, right? But at some point you have to understand that it's not all our fault. It's not Israel's fault, and it's not the Jews' fault. That your countries have become perverts and have no pride in yourself, for the fact that you reject nationalism, for the fact that you have leaders who are traitors, right? It's not our fault, it's your fault. It's your societies. It's your societies crumbling from within, and you're becoming an anti-Semitic bigot and blaming all your problems on Israel and the Jews. And, sir, you don't even understand how hateful you sound in your video, right? And I hope this is enlightening and eye-opening.
Otherwise, you're just going to get further hostilities. And if you are concerned about this, and the Israeli government, given the amount of money that they've poured into NGOs and activist campaigns
it's all our fault, my
to
friend.
combat anti-Semitism
It's Israel's
in
fault.
the US, UK, and Europe,
The tiny country of Israel, it's our fault that this man's country is having issues. It's all our fault. Because some Jews think certain ways, right?
they clearly are concerned about it. Well, guys, that hasn't worked. It actually made it way worse. I think that you might want to, snip the strings on the Anti-Defamation League, given they invented the phrase "a nation of immigrants," and call everyone from Donald Trump to City Sweet to PewDiePie a Nazi and an anti-Semite. So they've debased the currency of the accusation. I think you want to alienate those guys and instead uplift guys that think a bit more like Yoram Hazony, that say that if it's good enough for Israel, then it's good enough for England. Anyway, Hazony writes, but at this point, agreement ends between the two paradigms. Individuals looking at the same facts by way of these different paradigms see different things. Paradigm A, Auschwitz represents the unspeakable horror of Jewish women and men standing empty-handed and naked, watching their children die for want of a rifle with which to protect them. Or Paradigm B, Auschwitz represents the unspeakable horror of German soldiers using force against others, backed by nothing but their own government's views as to their national rights and interests. So in Paradigm A, it is a tragedy that Jewish people did not have a state and the means by which they could secure their own demographic and cultural future across the generations. Paradigm B says that whites are uniquely evil and a threat to Jews, so whites must be disempowered so that Jews are kept safe.
Do you understand that this guy doesn't really get it? That just because some Jews are crazy and liberal and they are they have loud mouths and they might have some positions of power, does he not understand that his own leaders and his own people have free agency and free choice and freedom to choose what kind of mentality they will push on their own societies? A society that does not have... The society that can be so easily influenced by a few different people, and a society that adapts the ideas of people and then falls for that and decides to self-destruct is not a worthy society, in my view, right? Because if a few people can influence an entire nation to behave a certain way, what kind of society are you? You're not a society that has freedom of thought. You're not a society that has any self-esteem or self-worth. You're not a society worth fighting for. So if that's how if you're willing to blame a few Jews for your choices and you're so easily influenced, then you deserve what is coming your way. And I don't feel bad saying this. It's the truth.
And lots of Jews object to Paradigm B, like Yoram Hazony, and think Paradigm A is most sensible. And actually, the self-conscious and militarized nations dealing with one another as friends, rather than operating by a double standard, is the only way by which we will secure our national futures. He writes, "It is important to recognize that these two views, which at first do not even seem to be talking about the same thing, are actually describing moral positions that are almost perfectly irreconcilable. In the one, it is the agency of the murderers that is seen as the source of the evil. In the other, it is the powerlessness of the victims, a seemingly subtle difference in perspective that opens up into a chasm when we turn these competing paradigms in another direction and look at Israel through their eyes. Here are the same two paradigms, now with their attention turned to the independent state of Israel and what it represents. Paradigm A. Israel represents Jewish men and women standing, rifle in hand, watching over their own children and all other Jewish children and protecting them. Israel is the opposite of Auschwitz. Paradigm B. Israel represents the unspeakable horror of Jewish soldiers using force against others, backed by nothing but their own government's views as to their national rights and interests. Israel is Auschwitz, which is why you're getting the European Union, in their pursuit of equality, condemning Israel for committing genocide or being an apartheid state and the like, when actually it's just operating by the rules of conquest that govern the Middle East and have done before the delusions of the rules-based international order demanded that you have to treat an enemy combatant and their civilian population, many of whose civilians were involved in the October 7th massacre.
Well, at least you admit it. At least you have the self-awareness and the honesty to admit the truth of that. Those monsters are just there to kill Jews and slaughter us and get rid of Israel. But you kind of insinuate that Israel is an imperialistic state that has started off as infringing on rights of Arabs, which is also another lie. But that's for another subject. But then again, if that's what you buy into and that's what you believe, then cry me a river.
Way, as if they are your own citizens and refugees inside your own borders, by shipping them aid during the war that you are waging against them. Like, that's demented, right? So,
well, at
if
least you
Paradigm A
understood.
is good enough for Israel...
At least you understand the perversion of that. Well, at least you have a little bit of your brain cells intact. I'm impressed.
Then Paradigm A should also be good enough for England and the United States and Europe. And it's only our treacherous leaders that are holding us back from that, and therefore nationalist Israelis should be encouraging their likely allies in the UK, the US, and Europe to say, guys, why don't you just copy our model? Be a self-conscious and proud nation. Recognize that your loyalty as leaders, your allegiance, is owed to the people to whom your state takes its name from. And so, England should be like Israel.
I'm a Jewish person, and I say I'm all for England being their own nation with closed borders and all that. But am I sad that what's happening to England and to Europe and to France and all these countries? No, because they were nationalists for 2,000 years. And when the Jews existed in their countries, right, they were either expelled or mistreated and murdered and massacred. So, and treated as slaves of the state. So, I don't really care what happens to Europe. For all I care, if the jihadis take over your countries, Allahu Akbar. Enjoy yourself. Be forced to convert to Islam. It's just measure for measure. Do you know what I mean? It's like, when have the Christians not forced Jews to convert to Christianity? Spanish Inquisition, England expelling the Jews, anti-Semitism written in your Shakespearean literature, right? It's only recently where England has an issue where they are getting eaten from within, right? It's like the the black widow spider, right? That they mate, and she eats her mate, or she kills her mate, right? And that's kind of what's happening in England, right? They're getting eaten from within, from themselves, and they're blaming it on Jews. So, am I sorry? I don't really care. I just hope the Jews get out in time. They should go to Israel, right, and stay here, because I think it's karma that what's happening to England and to all these other countries.
The US should be like Israel, not a Jewish state, but a homeland for their specific ethnic peoples. They remain the unquestionable majority.
I agree.
Practice their religion, and if they so choose, they can befriend other countries, like Hungary, like Japan, like the US, potentially like Israel, if our issues don't conflict. Now, this is a sensible position.
Yeah.
Lots of Jews did not take that position. As I've put in this article here, there was a Hebrew phrase that one of our guides, who had served in the IDF, really nice chap, had explained to me, and I don't speak Hebrew, so I've written it out here, but he says it's a play on words that translates from Hebrew to defending oneself to death. And basically, out of fear of persecution, there have been liberal Jews who have treated the populations that are most likely to give them safe harbour, to be friendly towards them, that share their biblical heritage. They've treated them like enemies and opened the borders to demented jihadists from the third world, and encourage the further reporting of said jihadists because they recognise they can't have them as their neighbours, but then they just inadvertently make Europe incredibly unsafe. And there was this weird disconnect that Israelis had,
Well,
probably because some of them don't travel outside Israel very much, where they saw Israel as an ethnic state for the Jewish people, but they described America as a nation of immigrants, or they described Europe as multicultural. And this wasn't malicious. It just, they don't understand what's going on in our countries. There's cognitive dissonance there that isn't deliberate, it's just ignorance. And what I tried to do with pressing on my questions while in the country, and with this article, which I've heard is now going to be translated into Hebrew by one of the people who, when speaking to the group out there, had mischaracterized America as a nation of immigrants and now realizes the error of his ways. What I tried to do while on the trip is explain that according to Ernest Renan's definition of a nation, what is a nation is a people with a shared history, heritage, and a common experience of suffering. And both England and Israel fit that bill. The English, the Angles, the Anglo-Saxons, Celts, Jutes, and Britons precede the naming of England and the unification of the various kingdoms under King Alfred the Great. And the naming of the nation of England by the Venerable Bede. They have endured a history of suffering, from Alfred burning his cakes under the Viking invasions to the grooming gangs and the Manchester Arena bombing. If we fit the same description of a nation as Israel, why can't we have the same model of national identity that Israel has?
no one's saying that you can't. No one is saying that you can't. But it's your own problem. It's your own people. It's your own problem. Israel's not dictating how you should run your countries. Some puny Jews, right? Puny, is that a word? Some Jews. Puny, let's see, what does puny mean? White face, skeletal. Yeah, it could be skeletal Jews, right? Some puny Jews. I'm Jewish, right? So I shouldn't talk like that. But some Jews who have some opinions and they have some weird ideas doesn't mean that you have to incorporate that into your lifestyle and make it your brand. You know what I mean? Like, and if that's what your country does and your society accepts, then that's your issue. Do you know what I mean? Like, you're not a worthy society if you can be so easily influenced.
Instead have to suffer the fate of somewhere like Lebanon or South Africa, which is ethnic heterogeneity, unilateral multiculturalism, rising Islamism, eventual civil war, and unspeakable atrocities committed against the host population because of their race and religion.
It's horrible.
By imported, hostile, tribal minorities.
Your issue.
Why can't we just do what Israel does? This is a question
You've
of
done it.
shot.
You have done it. And you've overdone it, right? And when it was time for Jews to escape Hitler, you closed your borders. And those Jews that happened to get snuck into England, you treated them like spies for the people that were murdering them. And that's the perversion that you've done in the time of the Holocaust. So, it's karma. I'm sorry, but it's just the way the world works, my friend.
Which a lot of the Israelis that I was on the trip with, because they just never contemplated that they would be an example to copy. Instead, they just thought, well, we're just going to get on with what we do, defending ourselves against, jihadist nutcases that we surrounded ourselves by, and we didn't think you guys would take any notice. And I think this is a perfectly reasonable demand of all nations to say, if it's good enough for Israel, then it's good enough for us.
So we surrounded ourselves by lunatics, we surrounded ourselves by lunatics. It's not like they surrounded us. We put them there to surround us, so that we should be in constant wars with people who want to slaughter us. Like, listen, dude, you might mean well, but the road to hell is paved with good intentions. So, yeah.
Shouldn't have a double standard just because the Second World War put a unjustified intergenerational guilt complex across all of Europe, including the nations that fought and defeated the Nazis. Because if you walk around England now, people have remarked, you'd think that they had lost the war. And it's because we're acting, or at least our leaders are acting, as if we did, and as if we have to punish ourselves. And we don't need any assistance in punishing ourselves. Thank you very much, Danny and Ram. Instead, that there should be condemned, and instead, we should be encouraged to model the same national, ethnic, and religious identity, the same muscular military, the same conviction in having children and building up our national economy for our own people as the Israelis do.
Well, if you're crumbling from within because you're an unworthy society. And it's karma, baby. It's karma. And I'm sorry. It's very tragic. A lot of Jews are very sad for what's happening for you. I myself believe, and there are many Jews like me, that you should be nationalistic and you should have strong borders and you should protect yourselves from jihadis, but it seems that you don't really care for Jews like me who believe that, right? You are willing to blame the entire Jewish nation for a few crazy liberal Jews that your people decided to incorporate their ideas, right? And decided to be influenced by any other ideas, crazy ideas that they themselves thought up. And so therefore they are being traitors to you, and it's your people who are standing with the jihadis. And let's be real, right? Like, the people of England, you would rather support jihadis over Israel. Okay? Raz, who speaks into the void, his channel, he says that he lived in England, and the casual anti-Semitism coming from the average white British person, it was so bad that now he left England, right? That's how bad it was, and they don't even realize how anti-Semitic they are. And right.
And one of the ways that can be done is for...
And you'd rather support, the average British person would rather support jihadis over Israel and over their own safety. You know what I mean? Like, that's the way of perversion, right? You have the jihadis slaughtering little white girls, raping them, right, and all that. But yet, the majority of the white British people will go in the marches with the pro-Palestine people against Israel. So you only have yourself to blame, my friends. Like, it would be hypocritical of you to say that, you know, you love the Palestinian people so much that you're willing to go and march in the marches with those jihadis against Israel, and yet you refuse to take them into your countries, right? You might not yourself stand with the pro-Palestine people and the slaughterers and the rapists, but a huge amount of British people stand with them. And so it would only make sense that you would accept them into your country and take those poor Palestinian people who are being genocided by the evil Jews who are running under tunnels in the sewers, right? Take those Palestinians to be in your living room.
Those in Israel who are sympathetic to that argument is to drown out the delusional voices that, as one guy had said on our trip, one guy explaining the sort of persecution complex that some Jews have on our trip, and said, it's easier for Jews to link up the intersectional rainbow because they see themselves as a minority. In Israel, the majority asks, how do we rebuild this 1,000-year-old identity that is fractured in exile? In America, they think, as a minority, how do we make sure that whites don't kill us? That mistrust is unwarranted. Many Israelis see that mistrust as unwarranted. The ones that go to NatCon see that mistrust as unwarranted.
What?
So shouldn't we enjoy the same model of national identity as Israel does? Because otherwise, the double standard is obvious, and it's going to cause Israel to have absolutely no support, allies, or friends in the West whatsoever. And I say all of this...
Right, so blame all the Jews for our own anti-Semitism, for the fact that you're a bigot, and for the fact that your people can't stand the fact that we Jewish people have enough pride to say that, to stand up for ourselves and finally have a country. And, you know, for the fact that your country is lost and you have stupid leaders and your societies are crumbling from within because you're failures and you're failing and it's karmic, right? Blame that on the Jew. Okay? And let me tell you a little secret. We've never had any friends, okay? And you're not our ally. You've never been our ally. And guess what? England will need Israel. And anti-Semitism is nothing new for us, my friend. So you can say that our attitude is causing our own deaths and our own anti-Semitism and the fact that Jews are getting attacked in the street. But no, your attitude, it comes from you, from within your soul. It comes from your societies. It has nothing to do with the way we behave. It has everything to do with who you are as a people, as humanity. And that is that you are a bigot, right? And you don't even see it. And you think you're well-meaning. But, you know, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, so...
Because we're going to do this anyway. Like, I have dedicated my entire career, before and after I visited Israel, to having a strong, self-conscious England, to restoring our identity to the status that it was before the First and Second World Wars.
So then go
So this is going to happen
into politics.
whether Israel is a fan of it or not. I am just saying that it's not going to be as scary as many of them believe.
Oh, so you want us to... So basically you are begging Israel to support you. And to make a stand and say, you should close your border. You have rights to be a nation. As if that's going to make a difference to your politics. I have a little secret for you, my friend. Whatever Israel says or does, it will make no difference into how your politics and whatever happens in your country plays out, right? You need to, at some point, to understand that you and your people and your government have to take responsibility for your own actions and your behavior, and you need to decide who will be your leaders because you have a democracy. And take some responsibility and start cleaning up your own backyard and stop blaming it on us. Stop making your country dependent on the support Israel gives you, because that is nonsense.
But we welcome the encouragement. We welcome the assistance. Especially because when
We
do
owe you
eventually
something.
evict the hordes of hostile foreign nationals from our country,
We owe you
they're going to have
something.
to go somewhere. And they're going to present challenges to the regions their homelands are in and that they return to. And so there's probably going to have to be a level of international cooperation.
As if we Jewish people owe you anything. As if we owe you anything after what you've done to us, you British people. Kicking us out, treating us like second-class citizens, being anti-Semitic. The average Jew, even when they were emancipated, they say that when they're at work, you know, the average British person is completely anti-Semitic and telling them that they're rich and they should go and pick up pennies, and you know, like the way Jews are treated in Britain, even when they have full equal rights. And this is how it's always been. And for the fact that in the time of the Holocaust you closed your doors to us, and when it came time for when we kicked the British out of this country, because in the time of the Holocaust, let's not forget that the British, when Jews were trying to escape Hitler and come to Israel, the British prevented immigration and sent a lot of the Jews back to Auschwitz. And so the audacity and the chutzpah that you think that you have to go and somehow... You think that we owe you anything after you prevented Jews from immigrating to Israel pre-1948 in the time of the Holocaust, and you put them in camps so as not to annoy the poor Arabs. You didn't want an Arab uprising, so you sent Jews back into the gas chambers when they were fleeing to Israel before Israel was a state. That's your crimes of Britain, as if we owe you anything. We owe you nothing. Do you understand? We owe you zilch, nothing. In fact, you need to get down on your knees and kiss our wall. Alright? Chutzpah. We owe you anything? After all that we've been through, somehow we need to give you, after all the abuse that we've been through from Europeans after the Holocaust. Unbelievable. The audacity, the lack of self-awareness, the entitlement. These non-Jews are so entitled that they don't even realize what they look like.
To rebuild our civil service and our intelligence services, and to conduct mass deportations of unassimilable third world migrants. And if we get counter-signaled, if the process gets frustrated by members of the Israeli Knesset who would rather
blame the Jews.
crazy jihadists are halfway around the world away from them, then there's going to be a conflict there. And
It's our fault, and he's threatening us that if we don't support him to deport all of, and to get involved in their issues that they don't want to take care of, right? It's our fault for the fact that him and his society can't conduct business from within because their government is trash and their society is trash, so therefore somehow he's dying for a stronger England and nationalism, and the few of them that want like him, somehow their failure is Israel's fault because a few of us in the Knesset refuse to lick your boots. Fuck you, bitch.
But rather, that conflict didn't exist. But it is possible, and if that conflict happens,
You're
I think
threatening
you're going
us.
to find that
You're threatening us.
whereas lots of boomer evangelicals would try and weigh up both sides, you're going to get Gen Z, as they age into politics, to just unashamedly pick their own national interests. And if it comes into
Yeah.
conflict with the interests of Israel, then they're going to cast that aside.
Oh,
So-
now you're threatening us as if our existence is dependent on Britain, America, or anybody. Our existence, we are here because God of Israel allows us to exist. We are a miracle. The fact that we have an army and we are not all being wiped out in this time. Okay? Our existence is not dependent on you and how much we lick your boots. Okay? So stop blaming your problems on us and get a life, bitch.
I think I've actually said anything unreasonable here. I think we should get rid of the double standard. I think that every nation
Blame the Jews. Focus on
deserves
us.
to practice the same sense of national identity that Israel has about itself. Every nation I like, anyway. So that would be, England, the US, the Anglosphere, Western Europe, Japan, South Korea, etc. And I think that
Fall asleep to this.
liberal Jews have been ultimately advancing a liquidation of identity that is a suicidal threat to not only their own security, but the continuity of my civilization. It just invites
Oh.
demented jihadists and third world anti-white racists.
Okay, so blame those Jews and blame all the Jews and maybe whatever, take the Jews from your country because we're so evil and we're causing the collapse of your society. So why don't you make a ghetto, stick the Jews in there to keep your society safe? How about kill them? How about that? Right? Do you see where this is going, my friends? These people are insane. Get a grip, bitch. Get a grip and stop whining like a little whiny bastard. Get a grip on your own country and stop focusing on Israel and Jews, okay? Go fix your problems from within. Fix your family affairs, okay? Get your family in order, right? If you want Israel and Jewish people to get involved and to help you, you can do it in a more respectful way. And stop blaming us for the fact that your society sucks.
Borders and expects me to embrace them with open arms while they have contempt for me, my identity, my history, and my faith.
You see, obviously, my opinion doesn't count, and any other Jewish person that has my opinion that agrees with him in regard to England being a society which is nationalist, right? My opinion doesn't count. He's pointing to the few liberal Jews who have some sort of influence and blaming the entire Jews for those. The entire Jewish nation is being blamed for a few Jews for the fact that they have influence on his society, which is weak and embraces ideas which is not only from the Jews, it's from themselves, and his society is weak and crumbling, and they have internal issues which they need to address. It's not our business. Take care of your own business. Take care of your own family. It's a family feud. We don't want to get involved, dude. Take care of your own family feuds. Since when is it our business?
No, thank you very much. I don't think we have to endure that anymore. I think Israel doesn't endure that. Israel has a giant border wall with
So
West
you're
Bank.
jealous.
I think that would be a very sensible idea for America to continue building.
So you're jealous of the fact that we do what we want and your government is punishing you, and your government hates themselves, and for the fact that, your government reflects your society. You voted them in. Like, figure your shit out, man. It's not our problem.
I think Britain has a natural moat, and we could just deter all of these various boats that come over from France and shut our borders, close down the passport gates of Heathrow and Gatwick to anyone except the very small handful of people from friendly nations that are a boon and a benefit to our country who like to be here and embrace as our friends. I think we can just do all that. I think we should do all that. And I think Israel exists as the exception to the post-war liberal rule that shows that it works. And so that's my takeaway from visiting Israel. We shouldn't put up with Islam in our country. we should not put up with becoming second-class citizens in our own historic homeland.
I agree
We
with
should
that.
not cling to this false binary of civic versus ethnic nationalism.
It's not a
It
problem.
makes no sense to cleave them in two. Nationalism derives, nations derive etymologically.
It's your
from
problem. It's your
peoples,
fault.
ethnicities.
It's your
It
business.
makes no sense to
Figure out your
try and
own
separate
family
how to
feud.
run your state from how states have formed and been run since antiquity. And up until this day,
Yeah.
this one small country in the Middle East that is much more successful than its neighbours. The final note that I...
And he's jealous. You see, this is where anti-Semitism comes from. It comes from jealousy for the Jew. Because we're succeeding and you're losing, but it's karma.
will make is, it's very interesting. The topic of aid from America came up frequently, and the undue influence of Israeli lobbying groups in American politics, like AIPAC, who are obviously they lobby on behalf of Israeli interests, but because they're American citizens or possibly dual citizens, they don't have to register as a foreign entity. And we heard from
see,
the most ardent Zionists living in Israel
anti-Semite.
that aid from America should end, and that AIPAC should register as a foreign lobby group because it casts a shadow of doubt over the sovereignty and legitimacy of the state of Israel.
So there are some Jews that don't like AIPAC because look what it's, all the anti-Semites, they don't see AIPAC as Jews, who are allowed to raise money for Israel, right? Jewish people who are citizens of America, they're being accused of dual citizenship. And no other society, right? No other, like the Chinese people won't get accused of being spies for China, right? Dual loyalties. It's only the Jew who gets accused of that. So this guy is an anti-Semite, but he doesn't even realize it, and he thinks he's not. But the internal bigotry is there, and this guy represents British society. He's a little bit better than the average Brit because he's able to admit facts about October 7, which most deny, and but the anti-Semitism is oozing and dripping from this man's mouth.
They don't like how the Biden administration tried to leverage aid to soften its policy during the war in Gaza. They don't like how it is used as an argument by people who are skeptical of Israel to say that they are an illegitimate state and that America is subservient to them rather than being partners. One speaker had said friends don't pay each other, and I think if they would like to restore, let's say, it's a friendship rather than a suggestion of subservience, they should cut that. Now, they suggested like a 10-year moratorium and then a mutual investment fund. How mutual that investment fund would be, I don't know. But I don't think you need to throw money at each other as developed economies. You can probably just buy things from one another, again, on the condition of reciprocity. But I think the fact that that's being discussed by members of Knesset, by prominent Israeli academics and media personalities, means that the discourse is cutting through and that they're starting to understand that the old talking points of the post-war order don't work anymore. You're going to have to deal with the peoples and the governments from these nations, when the governments are sufficiently patriotic, because they're not in England. You're going to have to deal with them as distinct entities, rather than just a liberal bloc, a nation of immigrants, a multicultural holiday destination that you can then return to within the safety of the border walls of your state for your distinct ethnic group. And none of this is malicious, by the way. It's just observing that, frankly, we don't really have country.
It's just observing that you're jealous and you can't take responsibility for the fact that your country sucks and it's going down. And you have an internal problem and family feuds which you can't figure out. And somehow you have to blame us and some liberal Jews for the fact that your society is collapsing from within. Dude, figure your shit out. It's not our problem, bitch.
We don't know much about each other's countries, but if we just copied their model, things would go a hell of a lot better.
Okay.
I want to finish by this quote from Submission. It's Michel Houellebecq's satirical novel about Islam overrunning France, and his titular character laments the fact that his Jewish girlfriend leaves France because of the Jew hatred by Muslims to go to Israel, and he just says, there is no Israel for me. But there should be. England should be Israel for the English. It's why we have Jerusalem as our unofficial second national anthem. America was founded as a shining city on the hill.
Aww. And I have to feel bad that you have nowhere to run. Now you know what it was like to be a Jew for 2,000 years. Oh well. It looks like the world has its way of making its rounds, my friends. It's very comforting. Sadly.
Anglo-Protestants, heritage Americans. America should be the Israel for Americans. This idea has been catching on, by the way. So before I actually posted this, my friend Carl Benjamin, in an exchange with James Lindsay, where James had asked, well, what are collective rights? Saying that England must continue to accept liberal individualism, even when we are being demographically displaced by our own government and populations that understand that politics is identity politics, and so they collectively bargain across racial, religious lines. Carl said, let's ask Israel and find out. Whatever rights they claim for Jewish people to their homeland in the Middle East, we will claim for the English people in England. Totally reasonable. If it's good enough for Israel, it's good enough for us. And Chris Rufo, after the recent strikes in Qatar against the Hamas leadership, said the Israelis command respect. They understand their enemies, ruthlessly prioritize their interests, demonstrate near-constant tactical brilliance, and are not afraid to buck elite opinion. It's a model of statecraft we would be wise to study and in many ways emulate.
Well, guess what? You had your country for 2,000 years. Britain had Britain. Europe had Europe. And you had your... Every dog has his day, my friend. And now the Jewish star is going up. And the fact that your society is crumbling from within is just a reflection of who you are. The soul of your nation. That's who you are. So, and it's okay, my friend. We, the Jewish nation, we will survive and we will thrive. And we will continue on. We are an eternal people, regardless of you, your ilk, your kind, that blames us for everything and all your problems.
Why? For all the accusations of the Israelis being basically a ethnically self-conscious imperial power in the region, like, I'm pretty sure a load of American Zoomers who look at the Reclaim Your Homeland posts and paintings the Department of Homeland Security has been tweeting out, I'm pretty sure they look at that and go, yeah, cool, I want that for America. That doesn't mean engaging in wars of regime change in the Middle East, but it does mean having a strong military, a strong sense of collective identity as heritage Americans or Englishmen or denizens of Christendom, to have a manifest destiny, to have a consciousness of the obligation that you owe subsequent generations, the kind of country and culture and institutions that you're building for them, to have a sense of common purpose, and to have gratitude for that, but also to have a degree of pride in that. Not the biblical sin of pride, of vanity, of hubris that precedes a fall, but a sense of righteousness in that. And the Israelis clearly have that in a very different way, in a culture and a faith that I don't understand, that doesn't belong to me. But I want that for English people. I want that for Christianity.
You've had it for 2,000 years, but now every dog has its day. Christianity is having its downfall. It is what it is. The crimes of the Christians for 2,000 years has been swept under the rug. And, you know, it looks like now the world has its way of sorting itself out, you know? Just saying. I wish the British people the best. I wish Europe the best. But the fact that things are working against you from within, and your own communities, and you're having your own family feuds and you can't sort it out and you're blaming us, the fact that you are literally blaming us for all your problems and accusing us of destroying your country, and you're basically now saying that somehow we owe you something and we need to help you fix your problems with the entitlement. I mean, like, dude. It's like, dude, I'm sorry, but this attitude's not going to help you. And it's okay. It's your issue.
And so, yeah, it exists. It's not unreasonable to demand it. We should practice that, and the Israelis should support us in having that.
We don't owe you nothing. We don't need to support you in any way. We owe you nothing, my friend. Nothing. Zilch. After all your crimes, we owe you zero, my friend. Zero. After the crimes of the Holocaust and how you denied Jews entry into England, and those Jews who entered England somehow were accused of working for the enemy, and when it came time for the Jews to try to emigrate to Israel during the Holocaust, escaping Hitler, and you put them in camps or sent them back to their death. This is what karma is, my friends. Measure for measure. Anyway, I'm sorry if I came across as hateful or whatever, but the truth is the truth. And it's not pretty. It is what it is, my friends.